The Dominant Saga, Book 3, The Chest of Wealth, written and narrated by Rai Abellana-Palomares. Chapter 1. Fire Begs for Purgatory. She remembered how the smoke stung sweetly whenever she breathed. It slithered into the sky, the thick, cloudy blackness burying the sun in a hellish blanket, and it spoke of nothing but life and blessing as the flames from which they were born blazed prosperously. "I rejoice every day that our lives have returned. We have your hands to thank, my lady," an old Pyrran wheezed, sitting on the ground as she scratched at the crusty scab of an old wound. "We have no use for prayer. We always come back ourselves, don't we? It's those old gods that challenge us and give us suffering." The lady stood above her, furrowing her brows. "Unfortunately so. May you recover along with the rest of those who'd been injured all those months ago. It took a long time to revive our homely forest." "I recovered a long time ago, my dear lady. No prayers," I said. "It's like they snigger at us whenever we make our voices heard." The lady observed her as she continued to aggravate her old wound, how the large, crusted scar on her chest spoke of the glowing yellow ichor that escaped and dried on her fleshy red skin. Both of them glistened under the glow of 1,000 fire trees. It was part of what made them Pyrran. Now, I need you to stop scratching that scar. Reinfections would further decrease already thinning resources," the lady sighed, her eyes falling with fatigue and impatience as the smell of old ichor re-entered her nose. Yet the old Pyrran on the ground saw her instinct and locked her glowing hot eyes with the lady's. There was offense behind them, she saw. Wisdom tends to hide behind those with aged bodies. This old woman's eyes spoke truth, more than she could ever believe. "There is no room for impatience when you're in the cabinet," she declared, never averting her scratching fingernails away from her scab. "The chief would not like that." "I know more about the chief than you do, and do not accuse me of impatience. Our best efforts are being put forward in regards to the rekindling of our many flames. You ought to remember that, old woman." The words seemed to escape from her lips. How dare she speak to a civilian in that manner? But the lady's chest grew heavy with real impatience, so perhaps the old woman's wisdom was true. "I apologize. That was not like me." She scoffed before laying her back against the charred fire tree trunk, muttering to herself, "Always the cabinet members." Her eyes left the lady's gaze in disdain. "Leave me here, but I thank you nonetheless for providing some support, Lady Zoria." The old woman remained silent as her hand left her scar. Zoria saw how her eyes fell as she slept with her back against the black bark of a tree, how her aged red skin seemed to reflect the fires that burned above her, how the natural flames upon her head dwindled with her energy. When she witnessed the old woman fall asleep underneath the burning fire tree, she remembered how the forest was completely lifeless just months ago. Trees were completely dead and fallen, almost as if they provided the graveyard of many injured Pyrrans during the infamous Seraphic ambush. She remembered the feel of the sharp cold storms that were born from the flapping of their many wings, the sounds of fear and desperation that echoed all around as branches fell and pierced through injured Pyrrans alive. Even when she burned through the chief's servant boy's tongue. No. It was to remind him of the consequences of betrayal. No Pyrran must ever feel relief at the sight of an ambush on their own people. Curse Lorgov. Curse the Seraphs, Elves, Humans. Curse them all. Since then, the forest had felt like nothing but a labyrinth to Lady Zoria. Nothing but a constant echo that reminded her of when they screamed, as if the renewed peace of the forest refused to be conveyed to her. The trees were as tall as faraway stone towers, with the flames giving them their natural hellish ceiling. Zoria walked through every tree, passing through the generation that took over the ones that killed her people like weapons stolen by wind. But life seemed empty on this side of the forest. Everybody since then has feared the chief and the cabinet, and would much rather stay away from them. The old woman under the tree was the first time she saw another Pyrran ever since the days that came after the ambush. Everybody seemed to have been shut inside their trees in fear of more storms. Lady Zoria's long fiber cloak began to sway on her hot red skin, hugging her slim figure as she pulled up her hood to hide her head of luscious flame. The trees slowly cleared in front of her with each step, until a wide circle of them began to surround her as she stood on the dry, grassy clearing. There was no one in sight, not even the person she was expecting to see. Was he being irresponsible again? I ought to take up the position of chief next time, she thought. He's too old to be guided around by her. She was his right hand and confidant, not his teacher or occasional caretaker. Her hand crept out of the shadows of her cloak, her fingers igniting a glowing amber that extended to her wrists before fading on her forearm, the flames dancing on her fingertips. "Chief," she whispered. "No need for that, Lady Zoria," the familiarly deep voice said behind her. "You're here early. Did you do what I asked you to?" The color of amber faded from her arms as the flames she wielded abruptly died. "That was the last of them, as far as I could tell from the information Velika provided us. If she overlooked anything, you can safely say some unassisted victims have the right to hate us." "They won't once they see that I'm here," the chief said. "The ring has brought us nothing but goodness. I am confident Velika did not overlook anything, nor will anyone have a reason to despise us because of that very fact. The whole world can change from just my ring finger, Lady Zoria. Surely you thought that I would use what the humans had willingly given us in exchange for our hostages." "Of course I had that thought. I'm not stupid. Or perhaps I'm just about to be led there," she thought to herself. "What I didn't consider seriously is that you would wear it without ever taking it off. Have you ever taken it off? Because I genuinely believed it a joke the moment I thought of that possibility." She could not see the chief as her back was turned to him, yet she could feel him crack a smile as a small laugh escaped his lips. "Why should I take it off? It gave us everything, Zoria. If I took it off, perhaps our forest would never have been brought back to life. With this, we can finally make everything better. Besides, my vision of greatness is finally going to come true. We will return to our former glory, Zoria. Just you wait. They will be so proud. Greatness, greatness, greatness!" Zoria always felt that she was losing an ear every time she heard him utter those syllables, groaning each time just as she did now. "Come on, face me, Zoria. Why conceal yourself with a cloak? The rest of the cabinet members will arrive soon, and they all know what you look like." Her hands went to her hood and pulled it back, finally letting the flames upon her head fall to her shoulders. "Didn't want the extra attention when going out. I despise the way some men ogle at me." "Who are they? Tell me. No one has the right to disrespect a member of my cabinet." Zoria could hear dark intentions in the chief's voice. "Never knew, and I don't intend to find out." She turned around to face the chief. His tall figure faced her back, the muscles on his body as large as ever, with flames upon his head as intense as burning fire trees, and a saturnine gaze that glowed like all other pyrans, except he possessed a telling weight behind them. "There you go," he said, Zoria detecting a mocking sarcasm in his tone. "You never fail to be exceptional. The other members will arrive soon. Feel free to stand around and wait. Or chat." Zoria paced around the clearing. The dry grass prickled against the soles of her feet, and each breath gave her a satisfying sting in her chest. However, it pained her to see how much the grass had blackened ever since. She remembered their lovely old shade of brown. Even when the forest seemed to have been brought back, perhaps those few remnants of death were the reasons why she could not properly feel it. It was an ache she could never ignore, and each scar made on the forest only worsened them. "Reminiscing old times, my lady?" he asked as he stood still. Her mind could only ever switch between grief and annoyance whenever she stood alone with the chief as of late. That ring seems to have worsened him somehow, she thought. Maybe I should grieve that too. "No," she sighed, exasperated. "Take that ring off, I beg. Return to your senses." Silence was always sharp whenever she stood alone with the chief. It made her muscles tense and her throat slowly tighten, leaving her breathless for a few quick seconds. And at every glance she took towards the chief, he was always lax and careless. His entire being seemed to confuse her at times, as his eyes were almost paradoxical to the rest of him. Many things were told to her before, except one. She was never sure if she cared for him, but sometimes she told herself that she did, and his eyes were why. "I burnt tongues and wings for him. My loyalty still remains. If not, I shall burn my own tongue and join Lorgov in the clouds." "No!" "Chief?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "When the human first gave you the ring all those months ago, how did you feel?" His brief silence knifed through the air. "Why do you ask?" "Curiosity." She could not tell if she lied or not. His body straightened as he began to pace around the clearing, much like she did. His eyes were unchanged, if not intensified. Zoria could tell he felt something strong and unshakable, as he was never the kind who outwardly expressed himself. In all honesty, Zoria, I felt grief. I never had my heart feel so heavy before, or at least not in a long time. I'd expected it to feel better. It did feel good having the ring in my hands, but between achieving a key to my success and seeing how much our force was ruined, slaughtered even, the losses weighed on me. I was shocked, pained, and unable to think of anything else. How much our people would have hated me for failing them. I never intended to fail them. The thought of them hating me kept me awake for days. Not even the sight of my new ring was enough to assure me. But then I wore it, and I refused to believe they hated me anymore. I felt blessed by fate itself. Now at every scornful eye that passes me, I remember I have it. One of our keys to greatness, to rebirth. And soon enough my name will be rejoiced all throughout the forest. Wouldn't you like that, Lady Zoria? There were many things she wanted to say, and none of them overly pleasant. She couldn't tell what or which to say, tossing her mind around so much until she heard more footsteps and the sounds of others entering the clearing, breaking through her sporadic pangs of stress. Relief washed through her at that moment. Finally, more have arrived. At the moment she saw 2 other cabinet members step in, she wore a friendly smile. Yet even when they glanced at her for acknowledgement, they didn't seem to care. Immediately she dropped it, the minimal weight returning to her lips. "The air feels tight," one of them said, tall and lithe with prominent cheekbones and a perpetually tightened lip. His voice was soft and rasped, obviously influenced by age, and the small smile he tended to wear revealed the crow's feet on the corner of his eyes. "Perhaps we missed out on some important things." "None missed, Master Drasko," she replied monotonously. The other looked at her with contempt. She was a small and dignified-looking Pyrran woman, yet her voice and the words she uttered were about as bold and boisterous as a child's. "Are you a cabinet member or the chief's mouthpiece, Mistress Zoria? Because he wasn't facing you when he asked." Zoria raised a brow at her words, pretending to care. "Being his right hand makes me a mouthpiece at times. Also, I do not like being called mistress. It's Lady Zoria." "It's all honorifics," she whined. "Nobody cares at the end of the day. Whatever you're called is whatever you shall be called. But I care, thank you very much. You can practice your philosophy on others and make them miserable in the process, Mistress Muriena, but not on me." Muriena's tongue clicked. "That was what my father told me, and his influence brought me here." "Mine did too. You're not automatically that special," Zoria droned. "Enough, both of you." Another cabinet member entered the clearing right as her voice echoed across the commotion, bouncing along the trees. Her tough-looking body and the cloudy flames upon her head were enough for Zoria to recognize who she was. "Apologies, Mistress Velika." "I thought you had more sense, Zoria. Stop bickering like a child," she told her. Zoria nodded, yet she was starting to feel insincere, and the feel of Velika's breath approaching her long, pointed Pyrran ear made her jump. And telling that advice to Muriena would be useless, knowing her. Velika was never the type to jest, she knew. "Be gentle on her. She's younger than the rest of us." "And old enough to read her surroundings," Velika added before pulling back. Her voice was gentle whenever she whispered. It was as if she wore a new face once the time came to be serious during cabinet meetings. "Chief Thonor, have any absent members recently notified you of their inability to attend today's conference?" Zoria glanced at the idle chief, whose eyes were distant and contemplative before he returned to his normal senses. As if normality was a thing ever since the ring slipped into his finger. "1. Master Niklot told me he needed time with his children, and therefore asked to be excused. So I gave the family man what he asked." Velika hid a sigh, but Zoria knew the mannerisms of her face. "Chief, Niklot has been absent from many meetings now. Tell him to make some time for the cabinet as well. The world doesn't revolve around only his children after all." "You'll wound the man just by telling him that. How cruel," said Drasko with his usual rigidness. Muriena groaned with dragging impatience. "Just tell him to come back next time. Anyway, we have things to talk about today. Velika, you have some new information for us to discuss, don't you?" "Quite a handful, actually. It might be a long day today," she droned. Zoria drew her hood back up and bowed her head, just enough so that the rest of them would believe she was still awake and attentive. She heard the sounds of Velika's fingers drawing lines of glowing ember in front of her, crackling and sizzling as each new letter or symbol was suspended in the air. She'd seen it many times and remembered how amazed she was at first. Even during her time as a trained war sorcerer, She never knew how to control flames precisely the way Velika and the other scribes did. Perhaps it was just an art for scribes, as the amazement expired not long after her first excitement over it. After all, Zoria was only trained to be a diplomat aside from sorcery. The rest of what happened before was left in the packed recesses of her memory, rarely ever recalled again. The words said by the cabinet soon turned into a collection of mumbles. She felt herself sway slowly as she kept her eyes closed, surprised by how she was still able to stand from the fatigue. Casualties, she heard someone announce, too tired to discern who. Fault. Recovered. Further restoration. I'd kill for a place to lay down and sleep. Just long enough for them to forget about me and my job here. Lady Zoria. Her body jolted awake, tensing as she made herself stand straight. Yes? You made a good effort in bringing back Lorgov all those months ago. Unfortunately, since you decided to set him free in exchange for the ring, he is no longer a concern. She could tell something was happening. The condescending air was enough for her to feel it. It was the human's decision to trade, not mine, and it was the chief who accepted the proposal. I only played the part he set up for me. Right, and I believe with his release came a missed opportunity. We could have kept him here, showed him the severity of his sins, just enough for him to submit to us again, without any more personal, selfish motives, Velika declared, puffing out her chest with conviction. Zoria raised her brows. I tortured him enough for that. The chief has no more need for Lorgov. Any more punishment and he'd become nothing but a humiliation. And if he slanders us with untruthful words to the humans and seraphs? Asked Drasko, stepping forward. We won't allow that. We are no longer strong enough to fight another battle, even when we have the ring as an asset. Not to mention the humans that came with the seraphs have connections to the elves. If the seraphs and the elves join forces, we will be outnumbered and eventually taken over. The fire will be blown out. Besides, I think the other parents would love some new form of entertainment if we give him some proper treatment, Mariana chuckled. So I say we kill him. Nobody can listen to dead people's words. They'll have no mouth anyway. Zoria felt her chest drop. That's unreasonable. Actually, it's a decent way to keep ourselves safe. If Lorgov is still there with the seraphs and humans, he'd give them another reason to antagonize us. And, as Drasko said, we cannot have any more battles at the moment. Not when Lorgov could be giving them more reasons to start more. Velika agreed. Then just take him hostage, said Zoria, starting to feel desperate. Keep him in the cave underneath the Great Mountain. It's cold there. He'll be surrounded by other old bones. How about you put the tongue curse back on him? Asked Mariana, her eyes widening with interest. That's sure to keep his mouth shut forever. Zoria remembered the day, once Mariana mentioned it. Lorgov had an unthinkable amount of drive despite the curse he was brought under. There were moments wherein she saw him push through the burning pain in his mouth as he was tied to the fire tree, writhing and twitching while the white-hot flame ignited his tongue as he spoke and screamed in protest. She remembered the rising of her chest at each cry, how it satisfied her hungry soul. Yet recalling it gave her a completely different feeling. She never felt her stomach churn so uncomfortably at that memory before. It would be ineffective. I'm afraid his spirit knows how to persist. That doesn't mean it still wouldn't hurt. He couldn't hold himself up for very long after, as you've told me before, Velika insisted. She could see Velika's frustration pent up inside her, just waiting to burst. Velika, if I were to speak honestly, I believe bringing back Lorgov once again would be pointless. We tried once and succeeded, but eventually he had to go in accordance with a deal made by a human, who ultimately gave us one of the things the chief has been exhausting his efforts trying to find. We have the ring. There's no need to potentially break a diplomatic promise just because of your fear of him speaking bad on us to the opposite side. Not only that, but bringing him back to us again would ultimately lead to another battle, wouldn't it? Let things remain in history. If he speaks bad on us, let him. He is out of our sights anyway, and we have no more need to concern ourselves over him. Do you think safety is a trivial matter, Lady Zoria? Asked Drasko with a conniving glare. Her face contorted in confusion. No? Do you not understand? It's safer to leave him alone with the seraphs. Besides, I don't think the Eight-Winged is that petty as to start another one just because Lorgov gave her motivation to. I heard the Eight-Winged can seem a little concerning at times. Didn't the chief say one time that she never sleeps? Mariana turned her head with intrigue glowing in her eyes. Is that true, Chief? That has to affect her reasoning, won't it? Her heart sank into her stomach, and it was as if the ichor that flowed in her vessels had come to a halt. Unable to peel her eyes away from the chief, she held her breath, thinking that his response would be left unheard by her if she didn't. The eight-winged. By the Lord, I feel sympathy for her even in the aftermath of all things. May Lord Radagast forgive me. She saw how his eyes seemed to question hers for a brief second before turning back to face the cabinet. She does not, from what I've heard. I was told that once. I do not remember where. Zoria's chest lightened with relief. At least he didn't tell them. Perhaps it was one of those memories she left in the back of her mind. Some of them flashed in her imaginary eye. The tall stone throne that held the seraph lady with giant wings so large and uncomfortable, they dragged behind her seat like a heavy, viscous river of white feathers. And every time she thought of their first meeting many years ago, she wondered if it still hurt. If the weight of her wings still burdened her, or if the stone throne began to feel too large as she was haunted by those visions. Clearly her strength had not faded. The scars she left on the forest are still visible, or perhaps only in Zoria's eyes. Let's stop concerning ourselves with the seraphs, she interjected, desperate to change the issue at hand. What we do have now is the ring. Now, Chief, I would like to ask you again. She cleared her throat as her hands began to tremble. What are your plans with it? What greatness, as you say, do you have in mind? The cabinet's glowing eyes stared back at her with boiling emotion. Velika seemed plain, however Drasko's had more disdain in his, and Muriena seemed inquisitive. Even the chief looked back at her with the same constant glare he wore, which Zoria found impossible to dissect. Was there anger this time? Or intrigue? Or perhaps the strange introspectiveness came back due to the ring's effects? The air was tightening again. Her hands clutched at her upper arms as they trembled while she bent over anxiously. They don't trust me, do they? She still had to speak. We cannot carelessly use that ring. With the luck it brings, anything can happen on our side. We have significant advantages. Yet even so, we must be responsible with the power it gives. What's your plan, Chief? What exactly is the grandiosity of your great plan, and how much more blood and ichor should we spill? The chief chewed his lip as he inhaled sharply, sending Zoria's shoulders into a tensed hunch. How much more do you want spilled? She could not abandon honesty at that moment, no matter how hard she tried. None at all. Muriena tried to hide a giggle. So now our beloved war sorcerer decides to stop spilling blood and ichor. When did you get soft? It was as if the ichor within her threatened to erupt, and all semblance of thought or reason left her. Shut up, mistress! The words regurgitated out of her throat, leaving behind a bitter taste of guilt. The air thickened around her, constricting the insides of her windpipe, and she knew that they were going to perceive her as unwell, in every sense of the word, at any incoming moment. I apologize. That was unkind of me. Velika transferred her gaze from her to Muriena, who softened her angered stare. Drasko calmly put a hand on Muriena's shoulder as his eyes turned to Zoria's, but she knew it was not with good intention. His eyes pierced through her, judging every orifice in her soul. She hated the contempt in his gaze. It was as if her whole being was worthy of hate. Perhaps he was right, as Drasko was the eldest member. Wisdom tends to hide behind those with aged bodies. Lady Zoria, what's been up with you as of late? Velika asked, yet she couldn't tell whether she was concerned or agitated. You're as soft as our ancestors once were. And you know what they were? Weakened. I know, she said meekly, much like a small child. Something began to hang high in her memory. In her imaginary eye, there was a small circle of Pyrans that she stood far behind after losing her way, deep in the forest's scarcely illuminated belly. They appeared to talk within themselves, weaving together a new flame with only certain words and syllables. It danced as if it had its own little arms, and its formless head donned what appeared to be a crown of long protruding sticks. She couldn't have been more than a young child at the time, and the fear she felt was mixed with intense curiosity. To her, the ones that spoke were old. Now she was as old as they were when she began to reflect. She remembered asking them, "Who are you all?" in a high child's voice, meek and timid. And she remembered one of them, a woman with wise eyes, saying back to her, "We are the circle of children, young girl." That was the night she disregarded her fear as the circle took her in after being entranced by the dancing flame, before she ever called herself lady or mistress of the forest. and it was only after the cabinet forcibly dismantled the circle that she took up the oath to become mistress. It was still ingrained in her, and she believed it. She never knew how the words of an oath would drastically change her life and perception for the rest of her years. They were weak and vulnerable, easily beat and easily defeated. When we let go of guiding hands, we sought out strength and courage. Beating hearts became hardened passions. Whatever the rest of the saying was, she recited, recalling it from the back of her mind. Exactly, Velika said. We let go of Lord Radagast long ago, much like how we must eventually let go of the ones that nurtured and taught us. Radagast was our father, yes, but we as Pyrans have grown past the need for him. You are no longer part of the circle of Radagast's children. Let go, Lady Zoria. I'm not a believer, she cried. I swear I'm not. I have stopped associating with Lord Radagast once I began to serve the forest. Trust me, I let go for good. She couldn't feel complete sincerity when she uttered those words, and the ensuing diatribes of the cabinet began to feel like the stare of sharp winds. You utter Lord Radagast's name many times, my lady, the chief said. When confronting the human as he offered us the ring, you threatened him under not my name, but Lord Radagast's. Her eyes darted to the chief. She could undoubtedly feel the fury rising in her chest. It was a fire burning stronger and brighter right where her heart was. She found her hand clasped onto the strings of her rough-spun cloak and tore it off, letting it collapse beside her. Keep your mouth! Lady Zoria, a worshipper of Lord Radagast and a former member of the Circle of Children? How have you not died yet? Moriana interjected with a demeaning tone, the mockery seeping into Zoria's ears like acid. Drasko turned to Moriana with a smirk, the sides of his eyes revealing his devilish crow's feet. She joined us voluntarily, as far as I could remember. I've always wondered why. Perhaps our dear lady has some secrets still buried with her. She was quite a small child back then, a far cry from how she is now. Am I right, Lady Zoria? She seethed with anger, pointing a finger at each member as she spoke with unrestrained lips. Her fingers began to burn blue at the tips, fueled by her rage and desperation. Everything in her body felt heightened. One word could send fire spewing out from her accusatory finger, or a single touch could ignite her whole arm in a dangerous blaze. You say I'm still a believer? I am not! Implore me to commit an act of blasphemy right this instant and I shall abide. I did it once with the oath, and I shall do it again. A flash of Velika's hardened stare passed by her enraged eyes, and she heard her whisper to the chief, She has proven her loyalty well, chief. She gives good counsel and seems changed, and no worshipper of Lord Radagast commits acts of harm upon others. Their perceived righteousness would not even allow them to witness it happen in front of them. The lady barely winces. I know, the chief announced loudly. Lady Zoria is an invaluable asset to the cabinet. However, we cannot deny that it isn't a normal decision to make. Why join the destroyers of your faith, my lady? Were you not truly there in your heart? Or did you choose to follow in your father's footsteps instead? An ache began to crawl from her forehead until it encapsulated around her skull. She could feel her mouth curl at the sides in anguish. It was as if all thoughts had begun to cease, leaving only dark smoke in her memories. Do not mention my father. He was my right hand, and so was his father and his. And what? She cried out, the tip of her pointed finger beginning to spark bright white flecks of unborn flame. What of my family? They discarded me in favor of you, in favor of a son. They took care of you in a way nobody else did to me, and I merely followed in their footsteps once my refuge was destroyed by them. Now you're destroyed by greed and lust. Think, Chief, have you ever thought about whether they wanted you to turn out like this? When you saw them die alongside your own parents all those countless years ago, did you consider anyone but yourself? Why exhaust your efforts terrorizing your people, the forest, killing them and bringing out battle after battle for some ambition you held in your heart all these years that I still have yet to understand? Does the cabinet know? Have you notified everyone except me, your invaluable right hand? What is it about me that makes you want me to be in the shadows at times? I try to help you, but sometimes I just do not get you. The clearing quieted. Each eye that Zoria fell upon was filled with discontentment and sheer offense. She couldn't help but assume that some of them preferred her dead at that moment. I didn't even insult a single one of them. Since when was asking a question a crime? Anger had never overtaken her so intensely before. It seemed to pulse through her until she stepped over her cloak, still on the dry, grassy ground. The labyrinth that was the forest of fire closed around her once more, as the clearing slinked further and further back behind her, dragging her feet between the gaps of the tall black trees, still burning bright at the branches while the smoke crawled up and beyond the sky. The way they moved gracefully as they reached up to some unknown limit seemed to calm her mind by a little. Many thoughts slowly left by then, leaving only a want for mundanity. Perhaps the ambush had softened Lady Zoria. Never had she seen anything close to a sea of bodies before that day. The stench remained in her mind, the smell of wounds and infected ichor. She recalled that old woman scratching at her wounds underneath the tree, and the way it reminded her of that despicable stench, and how it clung onto her nostrils. "It's those old gods that challenge us and give us suffering," she remembered her saying. "No prayers," I said. "It's like they snigger at us whenever we make our voices heard." Wisdom tends to hide behind those with aged bodies. The scarred trees had led her back to where that old woman still slept. If it wasn't for the subtle rising and falling of her chest, she could have been mistaken for dead. Zoria was not surprised at all to pass by her again. She crouched to check on her, yet she felt reluctant to wake her. The woman seemed less spiteful when asleep. Perhaps she was having pleasant dreams. She felt her shoulder jerk as a drop of cold rain touched her skin. Lord Radagast. The stinging smell of the fire trees started to intermingle with the faraway petrichor. She glanced upwards, unsure if it was for the rain or some hidden desperation. Yet the sky was still blanketed by thick black smoke.